Thank you so much for joining us today with How Do We Heal podcast. We are so happy to have you guys with us once again. And today we are in for a good treat. We have heard people's stories, but today we're going to talk about how do we heal. So, I have the pleasure of introducing you all to Crystal Owens, a licensed professional counselor with Red Cedar Psychotherapy. Today, Crystal is going to help us learn how we can heal. First off, we're going to figure out what these buzz terms that we hear all the time. What does it mean to be triggered? What are boundaries? How can we deal with the trauma from our adverse childhood experiences? If you are ready to get some answers to some questions that you've been carrying, you should tune in today. Hey, Crystal, how you doing?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on. So, if you would tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. I heard the term psychotherapy, and I thought that you were going to come in here and you were going to start trying to hypnotize me.
Oh my goodness, absolutely not. Psychotherapy is basically a fancy way to explain that we're in a collaborative process to help and support your healing. Um, it's a fancy way of explaining talk therapy.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, do you administer medicine?
I do not. I am not a prescribing physician. However, I am able to diagnose. I am a mental health service provider, but I don't deal with medication.
Now, do you deal I know that there are a couple different therapists that I spoke with, but not everybody deals with trauma. Do you deal with trauma?
Absolutely. And honestly, trauma informed care is so important. I would hope that that practice extends not just beyond into the therapy room, but into our physicians, our dentists, and all the people who provide holistic care.
Mm, mm. So, the purpose of How Do You Heal podcast is to discuss how we heal from sexual abuse. So, a few of our guests have come on and they've had adverse childhood experiences. They've been molested as children. Some of them have been molested by family members. Others have been molested by family friends, and they have gone through life. Some people were able to kind of get some justice.
Mm.
Some people have had therapy and they've been in different programs. But the majority of the people that we speak with, they just kind of swept it under the rug and they've just been existing.
Yeah.
So, is that something that you see often where people don't go to therapy, they just kinda carry it with them?
Unfortunately, yeah. It's one of those things where you don't always recognize the weight of what you've been carrying until it starts to show up in different ways that impact your relationships, your occupation, your education, your ability to connect with other people. Oftentimes, it's when those things start to decline that people recognize, okay, there's something that I need to attend to.
Mm. So, just to share a little bit about me,
Mhm.
I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. From the age of 5 years old, just like several of our guests, I was molested, and it didn't stop there. I was molested by one family member, and when that stopped at around the age of 11 or 12, then another much older, closer family member began to molest me. And when I got older, I thought that I was supposed to well, for years, I didn't tell anybody.
Right.
I just kinda kept it in. It was almost like there were 2 version of me.
Mm.
There was the version of me that was, getting good grades in school and joining the yearbook club and being in the journalism program and singing and producing because I came from a family where you are taught to excel and you're taught to be great at everything. But then there was this other side of me that was dealing with being young and performing fellatio on my abuser and being afraid to even go to sleep at night because I don't know what's going on, or maybe thinking that if I don't allow it to happen, I may be beaten, I may be, verbally abused. And it almost felt like I had to be 2 different people,
Yeah.
and for years, I felt like I had to keep a secret,
Mm.
that I couldn't tell anybody else, and I felt like I wasn't protecting myself. I
Mhm.
found myself feeling like I needed to protect the people who were abusing me, and then I felt like people wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
I thought that they would call me a liar or say that I was fast or, I just and I hadn't seen I hadn't had it happen to me before,
Mm.
but I saw it happen to so many other
Yeah.
young girls where they were called fast because somebody was touching on them or they looked a little way they looked away at a certain person or
Right.
just being called fast or being hypersexualized as a
Mhm.
child. And I was really concerned that that would happen to me, and I didn't want that to be my story. And so for years I ran from it until, just like you said, it started to manifest when I went away to college.
Mm.
I got out of my home environment. I went away to school, and it was almost like I lost it.
Wow.
I was going to s and people, my friends was crack up and crack jokes at me at this time because this is years ago. We didn't know about depression or functional depression. We
Right.
didn't know about PTSD. Nobody talked about that
Mhm.
stuff. But I remember going to one of my lecture classes, and I had on my pajamas and a jogging suit. Like, you could see the pajamas outside of the jogging suit,
Mhm.
and I'm sitting in class, and I knew that I wasn't all there. I knew that something
Mhm.
was wrong, but I was just trying my best to show up.
Sure.
And it was in that moment when found myself flunking out of my freshman year of college and feeling like, oh my God, I'm stupid.
Mm.
I can't compete with these people on this level. When realistically, I had just went through a lot of extreme trauma. I had just had my head put through a shower glass door
Mhm.
right before I went off to school. And once I finally got up the courage to have the discussion about what had happened to me to a close friend who made me tell my parent, um, that's when the change occurred, because one of the
Mm.
first things that my mom did was make sure that I went to therapy. And as I sat in there to tell the therapist my story, I got enough courage just because I couldn't tell the police yet. The
Yeah.
only person that I could tell was like, okay, I can talk to a therapist.
Mhm.
So we went to, I think it was called the Sexual Abuse Center here in Nashville.
Mhm.
And I went and I was like, all right, I'm going to talk to a therapist. And I remember this young, and I could tell she had a bleeding heart. She
Mm.
was Caucasian
Mhm.
and on fire, ready to help. But as I began to tell her my story, I didn't even dive deep. She started crying,
Mm. Really?
crying, crying. And I immediately went into this mode where I felt like I needed to protect her. And
Yeah.
I couldn't tell her the full weight of what was going on. So I left that therapy session feeling defeated.
Mm.
I left feeling like nobody is there to be able to help me with that. Do you ever run into situations where people come and have conversations with you and they feel like they haven't, in their previous
Mhm.
in their previous relationships with other therapists, have
Mhm.
they ever had the experience where they feel like the therapist couldn't carry the trauma that they were dealing with?
Well, first, I just wanna say I'm so sorry for the experiences that you had and the courage that you have in using your voice in this way to empower other people and taking something that was so hard and turning it into this.
Thank
Um,
you.
so, moving into your question though, yes, people try out therapy.
Mm,
And honestly, you should. You have to find the fit,
mm,
the one that allows you to tell your story. One of the things that I spend the most time on is just connecting.
mm.
I want my clients to feel comfortable before I ever throw any modalities or techniques, anything at you. I just want you to see me as a person who is there to support. So sometimes people do come, and I'm maybe the third or fourth person that they've seen. Or in some instances, I'm the first one, and I get to show them, a very nurturing therapeutic experience. But absolutely, people will make multiple attempts at finding support. But what I tell them is even if I'm not the one they choose, please don't stop trying.
Yeah. So you think it's important for people to make sure they interview the therapist?
Oh, yes. Absolutely, and even in my, consultations, I have a list of questions that I want to know, but I don't mind also being that kind of, provider who also lets you know I'll walk, my talk. So I'm a therapist who has found value in going to therapy.
Yeah.
And honestly, we all can benefit from it.
Yeah, we can. You
Mhm.
are absolutely right. No matter what, whether it's intense trauma
Right.
or you just having, some rough patches in your life,
Oh,
you can
sure.
benefit from going to
Absolutely.
therapy. Now,
Absolutely.
I did keep interviewing. I didn't
Mm.
stop. I kept interviewing therapists, and actually, wait a minute, I'm lying. I did stop when I felt like she
Mhm.
couldn't, when I felt like she could not, connect with me,
Mhm.
like you
Mhm.
said.
Yeah.
When I felt like she couldn't carry it,
Sure.
I was like, "Oh, this therapy stuff is for the birds. I can't
Mhm.
believe I wasted my time going down there and working up enough courage to be able to tell her that
Right.
just for her to not." So I did stop, but you know what did not stop?
What's that?
The trauma.
Mm.
The night terrors didn't stop. The anger that I carried out, it was almost like I had this chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
The trust issues, that stuff just did not stop, and because it did not stop, it landed me on this downward spiral where I was still doing. I'm one of those people that like to do 100 things at once.
Mhm.
I'm half Jamaican, and you know how, in the Living Color days, they talked about us having 100 jobs. It's the truth.
Right.
I figured it out. I mean, we have 100 jobs, and I think I like 100. But because I'm one of those people, it's
Mhm.
easy for me to be able to hide or to
Yeah.
mask what was going on underneath. And what ended up happening is I started to have anxiety attacks.
Mhm.
And it was the weirdest thing. I had
Yeah.
never had the anxiety or panic attacks before.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, my rate would increase. I would get shortness of breath. I was afraid of the space that I had been in already. All of a sudden, I was afraid of it, and it was almost like I was I almost thought I was gonna die, honestly,
Mhm.
in that
Yeah.
moment. I didn't know if I was having a stroke. I didn't know anything
Right.
about anxiety attacks or anything like that.
Mhm.
And so when that started to happen, I ended up having to go and be hospitalized. I went and got myself some help.
Mhm.
And I was hospitalized for it was long. It's the hardest 2 days of my life, girl.
I'm sure. I'm
Actually, no,
sure.
it really wasn't hard. Going and getting the help. The hardest part about realizing that I needed help
Mhm.
was actually showing up to the first place I went to was the mental health co-op here in
Mhm.
Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm just gonna say this. My experience was a little different at the mental
Mhm.
health co-op. I didn't even make it past the intake room
Mm.
because for some reason, I don't know why my I want to say my trauma, it was almost co-occurring because I had other
Mhm.
stuff that was going on.
Uh-huh.
And this is going to sound ridiculous. I know people are going to be like, Christy or Jenny. People are going to be like, Jenny, I can't believe you said that. I could not go to places that had old furniture.
Mm.
If the furniture was old, and I know
Mhm.
that sounds absolutely absurd, but when I went in there and I looked around, I was like, "I can't break down in a place like
Mm.
this."
Okay.
So I had to go to Vanderbilt.
Okay. No shade. No shade, right? It is what it is.
I had
Yeah.
to I had to go, no shade. I had to go to Vanderbilt. And when I went there, I didn't realize that it was something that I needed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Those 2 days where I didn't have to worry about what I
Mhm.
was gonna eat, what job I had to get to, those 2
Mhm.
days where I can actually focus on
Mhm.
doing the work
Yeah.
that I need to do, that I could talk to people who could say, "Okay, this
Mhm.
you're not all right right now.
Yeah.
Let's work through this together."
Yeah.
Although I that it was voluntary. I went there myself. After those 2 days, they paired me with, a therapist from the Evelyn Fry Center here in Nashville,
Right.
and
Mm,
I was introduced to EMDR, and it
mhm.
changed my life.
So powerful. Yeah.
It changed my I you know, and I want us to get into it. Can you
Sure.
explain to people what EMDR is?
Sure. So EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is a therapy approach that really seeks to break down those traumas, those disasters, those things that we're anxious about, those difficult moments that might otherwise feel very stuck. It utilizes bilateral stimulation,
Mhm,
in other words, eye movement
mhm,
or tapping or even sound
mhm,
that can alternate. And by going through this process of sharing your story while those bilateral stimulations are also taking place, it I think of it like this. Let's say you have a clogged drain
mhm,
in your sink or bathtub, and there's the murky water that
mhm.
won't go away. You might turn on the faucet, it's flowing, there's clear water coming in, but that clear water is still sort of muddied by what's stuck.
Yeah,
EMDR allows us to clear that. It allows that drain to clear so that the good things, the positive things in life, the stuff that we haven't quite been able to really tap into, it actually begins to flow.
yeah. That's exactly what it did for me, and to be honest, I'm kinda a jokester. People say I'm silly. I play
Yeah,
all day long,
yeah.
and so as I sat in her office, I thought that she was kidding when she said, "You wanna try, EMDR?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Okay, are you trying to hypnotize me? Because I
Yeah,
am not here to be
right.
hypnotized. No, I'm not."
A lot of
Closing my
people
eyes.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, there's some kind of like, I don't know, woo-woo, weird
I did.
science kind of thing
Uh-huh.
going on with this. We're not magicians, we're mental health providers, but this is an evidence-based modality, and it is, utilized for things such as PTSD.
Mhm,
But, you touched on several things when you were talking about your experiences from childhood and how it just creates this kind of ripple effect later in life.
mhm,
It is so important to understand that the things that we don't manage to, the things that we don't work through,
mhm.
they will persist.
They will.
They will persist.
They will.
And so the goal is to get closer to healing and not farther from it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I loved EMDR. The first session, I think she started with tap with me and she was
Mhm.
tapping, and because I'm silly, I started laughing and I wasn't really I wasn't really paying
So it
attention.
took a little
So
longer.
it took a little longer.
Yeah.
And so the second well, in the same session, she was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, this tap is not working for you." And
Mhm.
so she said, "Let's introduce sound."
Try
And
something
so she
else.
put the headphones on and she still did the tap where she was tapping my
Mhm.
right and my left leg,
Yeah,
and she had the tones going at the same time. And then she would ask me to first she made me create like this safe space,
absolutely.
and then she would ask me to go back to different
Mhm.
times in my journey. Maybe it was something that I shared with her
Mhm.
during our talk therapy session. And
Yes.
she had me go back and she had me really go back.
Yeah.
What does it smell like? What does
Yeah.
it taste like? What do you see going on? And I didn't realize how real
Yeah.
those visions or those memories can be
Absolutely.
when you're just focused in where because I spent my life running from them.
Mhm.
There was no way I was gonna mentally go back there on purpose.
And the thing about EMDR, it is a very scripted protocol. There
Mhm,
are specific ways to do it,
mhm,
but it is rooted in safety. And
mm,
so the initial parts of it are just simply helping you feel safe to go there.
yeah,
So, unlike traditional talk therapy where the client is just kind of sharing and the therapist is listening. EMDR, actually really has a lot of therapist input. So there's a lot of asking the question of what's happening? What do you feel now? Really kind of checking in. So there's that like foot in the present and foot in the past.
Yeah.
But the whole point is to get you to your future.
Yeah, and she did that in that session. It was
Mhm.
so phenomenal, and it was almost like when we were there in that moment, as I
Mhm.
was in that memory, it was almost like she was saying, "Now let's reframe this."
Yes, that's the reprocessing. That is the part where we're now looking at some of those negative cognitions or those thoughts about yourself that might have existed because of the trauma. Things like, I'm not good enough, or there's no one there for me, or I'm unloved. Now we're starting to work on a new narrative for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, I even experienced EMDR for myself and found it so powerful, which is why I wanted to be trained in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, with it, you said bilateral stimulation.
Mhm.
So that basically mean that you're stimulating the right and the left
Absolutely.
hemisphere of the brain at the same time?
Absolutely. So I kind of describe it to, make the connection to the ways in which a person might have had a stroke.
Mhm.
They have that stroke and it might have affected the right side of the body, but that's because the left hemisphere had the injury.
Mhm.
And so just with that awareness, we are doing bilateral stimulation, which is now igniting both halves of the brain. So now we're doing this whole brain processing. We're not just stuck in the images and the feelings. We're now able to look at other details that might exist. Whereas you might have said, I feel very alone, now we might start to recognize when I did share, there was my best friend who was there with me.
Yeah.
When I did share this trauma, my mom supported me.
Yeah.
There were people at the hospital who were so kind to me. This happened, but I have people. I'm
Yes.
actually not as alone as I thought I was. So now we're reprocessing. Now we're bringing in additional details to help you go from that clogged drain to let's let life flow.
Yeah. Now, do people normally process with using both sides of their brain? Do they normally use the right and the left hemisphere?
Not typically. Now, that's not to say that we're not fully aware,
Mhm.
but sometimes there can be a traumatic event that can be so big, so profound that we just can't manage, processing it fully.
Yeah.
It can be so profound that it's really hard to know, what do I do with this?
Mhm.
And that's that stuck feeling that I'm mentioning.
Now, in your work, are there some
Mhm.
other like modalities that help people with creating boundaries or what to do when they're triggered? Because
Mhm.
I'm going to say what to do when they're triggered because I went through EMDR
Mhm.
and after I left, it didn't even take that many sessions for me, which
Mhm.
was phenomenal. I felt empowered. I felt like I was healed.
Mm.
And at that moment, I thought that I was healed. I didn't realize that healing was a journey
Yeah.
and that it ebbs and flows and that you could still be triggered when you think that you have hit all of these milestones.
Mhm.
So a few years later, and maybe like 10 years later,
Mhm.
after I did EMDR, I was triggered and it took me all the way back.
Mm.
So I want to talk about triggers.
Mhm.
W We hear it all the time, "I'm
Mhm.
triggered, I'm triggered." I know,
Sure.
especially when I'm talking to, like, my cousins and my brothers,
It's a buzzword.
that it's a buzzword.
Yeah.
They always say, "I'm triggered," and I'm like, "You just
Mhm.
don't want me to say something to you, now you triggered."
Right.
But being triggered, there it means something.
Yeah.
Can you define what being triggered
Sure.
is?
Just trying to get away from the buzzwordiness
Mhm.
of it, I think of it as being sort of on high alert. It's
Yeah.
like my alarm system has been, is detecting some things that I might begin to feel like I need to protect myself from.
Yeah.
It's alerting my fight or flight. It's alerting my sympathetic nervous system that that there's something that I need to kind of push through, power through, or fight my way through. Um, so yeah, it is true that even after multiple sessions and some deep dives that you're still going to find those things that might ignite your anxiety, your fight or flight. However, we can, as you mentioned, learn boundaries and different things and our assertiveness that helps us navigate when we are on high alert. So, when I think about boundaries,
Mhm.
I call them basically guidelines
Mhm.
because a lot of people think of boundaries as just this sort of walled off, this invisible wall around me, and nobody's getting through.
Yeah.
But actually, they're guidelines of how we work together.
I like that.
Yeah. And I explain that even to my clients when we're in our first session, that initial intake appointment. We go over the ways you can reach out, the ways that I can support you, even what my hours are.
Mhm.
Those are guidelines,
Yeah.
right? And they help us work well together. So when you're thinking about boundaries, think about first those things that you value,
Mhm.
those things that you want to hold dear. In my work, I'm a mom, so I wanna make sure that I get a chance to get home and help with homework and, do all the things that mamas do.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
that's the thing that I value. So, my guideline for work are the hours that I keep. So, that's not to say that I don't see people, but I do so in this framework. So, if we think about boundaries, we're going to create the framework that helps us connect, but in a way that's respectful to me, that's respectful for you. And, well, then the hard part comes. And sometimes that's with asserting the boundary. And that's usually the hardest part.
You know what? Now that you said guidelines instead of boundaries, I think I'm gonna switch my terminology. And I'm gonna tell people these are the guidelines that I have set in place for us to be able to work together.
Yeah.
And I love that because I recently had one of my abusers and I were able to have a discussion. And
Mm,
I would venture to say that we were able to heal our relationship. I was able to confront
mm,
them about what had happened to me or what they did to me. And
mhm,
then we were able to figure out new guidelines on
mm,
how we could work together. And so there was not too long ago, the person that abused me wanted to, just like any other family member would, wanted
mhm,
to come over and spend the night at my house. And I said yes because I didn't want to be
mhm,
rude.
mhm,
I didn't want to rock the boat.
mhm.
But everything inside of me screamed
Yeah,
no.
listen to that.
And I did.
Good.
I had to
Mhm,
because all in that moment, I pretended for about a week that it was a yes.
mhm,
And then I said, I got outside of my environment. I was on vacation and I called and I said, listen, I
mhm.
love you and I appreciate you. And we have healed from what has occurred, but there are boundaries.
Right.
There are guidelines, and you
Mhm.
cannot spend the night at my house.
Right.
We have hit a boundary, and it was one of the toughest discussions that I had, but I felt so empowered
Good.
having it.
Yes.
And I said, there is no blueprint for how you heal the relationship with someone who stole your innocence and virtue.
Yeah.
There is no blueprint. I haven't found one yet, if there is. And so every day we're figuring this thing out together. And this
Mhm.
is literally what I told them. I said, so you may feel uncomfortable right now,
Mhm.
but this is what I have to do in order for me to feel safe. And I have to prioritize how I feel.
Absolutely.
And Mhm,
I'm so sorry. I didn't wanna overstep. One thing that I do wanna add is kind of like a little disclaimer to
mhm,
those boundaries. In instances where we're talking about safety, it's okay for that boundary not to just be a fence or a screen door. It's okay if that boundary is a wall. There are
yeah.
some instances where there isn't a negotiable.
Mhm,
You were able to find your way, which is a testament to you, but not everybody is at that place.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's really important to recognize that that boundary might be more rigid than some.
Yeah. Yeah, and, we worked to get here
Mm,
because there were years where I could not speak to them at all.
right.
There were and then if when I was triggered, I did not speak to them for a year, and
Mhm.
I don't feel bad about that.
Mhm.
Whenever I feel like I need to take a moment to myself and I need to turn that fence into a wall, I
Sure.
do it, and I don't make any concessions
Yeah.
until I am ready. I allow how I feel to guide how close or how far I want to
Mhm.
allow them into I'll call it my inner sanctum.
Yeah, good.
I just and I explain it. The good thing is that it took us years to get to this place
Mhm.
because at first I felt like I needed to have this person apologize.
Mhm.
And I cried and I screamed and I said, apologize, apologize, apologize. And
Right.
they just wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't apologize. And it tore me up until one day it was almost like I heard God say to me, now forgive them.
Mm.
And I'm like, God, what do you mean forgive them? They won't even say I'm sorry.
No.
And I heard God say, forgiveness is for you, it's not for them. Because as long as you attach your healing to them
Mhm.
saying, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you will forever be in
Yeah.
bondage. And although you're not physically still in those same situations, you are mentally putting yourself
Right.
there by making them be in control of how
Mhm.
you feel or your healing.
Right.
And when that happened, it was like a aha went off in my
Mhm.
body and and I was like, "You know what? I forgive them." It took some time.
Yeah.
That forgiveness came,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden, I didn't need them to apologize to me anymore.
You took your power back.
I took my power
You
back,
did.
and I felt that paradigm
Mhm.
shift. It was so weird, and and ever since then, I have just felt like
Yeah.
I felt like my true self, I'll say. I felt
Yeah.
like my true self. I felt like I can do anything
Mm.
because I did take my power back. And then a few years later, they apologized and I said, I don't even need
Don't
that.
even need it.
I don't need it."
Yeah.
And I have been as free as a butterfly ever since.
That
Yeah.
peace that passes understanding, right?
Come on now. You better come. Don't get me shouting up in here. I will shout.
I tell my clients, I'm like, sometimes you're gonna get therapist crystal and sometimes you're gonna get Bible study crystal or or whatever version. Like, listen,
Hello.
it's all in one.
It's all in one. My
Yes.
audience already knows. Sometimes you might get the old rapper Jeni Calhoun, and sometimes I might bust out them singing bowls. And then sometimes we might sit here and hold hands and pray and cry.
We do what we need to
We
do.
do.
And I tell my clients, we do what works.
Hmm.
Whatever that is, bring it in the room.
Yeah.
If we need to pray, if we need to just sit, if you need to just vent, if you want to share all the texts and the DMs, okay, we'll do that too.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, bring it because healing looks so different for every person.
It does. Now we are nearing the end of our segment.
Sure.
And before we do, I want to ask you for people who have people in their network or
Mhm.
that's close to them that have been impacted by sexual abuse, how can they hold space for them? What are some
Mhm.
ways that they could hold space or show up for the people in their lives?
There are so many incidents where people simply do not know exactly what to say and what to do.
Mhm.
And I say for anyone who has experienced a trauma and for the loved ones who are being there, simply ask,
Mhm.
how can I support you? What
Mhm.
do you need? It's more so that question of not it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. What do you need? And allow that person the space to share. Sometimes they may need space, sometimes they may need time, and it's important to give that. But for those that we love and if we're trying to support them, check in. Ask, what do you need?
Mm. Thank you.
You're so
I didn't
welcome.
realize it was going to be that simple. Sometimes people feel like they have to do the most, I'll say.
Yeah.
And it could simply just be being A good friend.
Be a good friend, be present.
Be present.
We forget how lonely life can be and how isolating a sexual assault is.
Mhm.
It's not the kind of trauma that draws people in. It's the type of trauma that actually feels very lonely and pushes people away.
Yeah.
When we lose someone to death, people rally around you. They bring food. They come and they say, "I'm going to get you through this." If you share, "I've been raped," people pull back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes we simply just need to be present.
Ooh. Ooh, that's deep.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if somebody came out and said, "You know, I was sexually abused," and then the community rallied behind them and brought food and prayed for them and sat with them and helped them clean up their
Yeah.
house? Because, you know, there have been several, people that I've had the pleasure of meeting on my journey,
Mhm.
and they look like they have it all together externally, but when I go in
Yeah.
their house,
Yeah, you see the truth.
I see the truth. And it's almost like they and people will go in their house and be like, "Oh, your house so nasty." But when I go in the house, I
Mhm.
see, okay, we got some cleaning up we need to do together.
Yeah.
Because there is something else that is going on here because people can literally be depressed and they're laughing and joking and hanging out, turning up in the club with you in the
Yeah.
section buying bottles, but really be running.
And there's so much more
Mhm.
happening under the surface. So, by asking, "Are you okay? What can I do? Can I help you? What do you need?" That is open-ended. That allows that person to just simply fill in the gaps and tell you how you can be support. So, don't shy away. That's a time where we need to rally together, truly.
Excellent. Well, I thank you so
Yes,
much,
thank you for
Crystal.
having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for just being open and sharing with us. And please, let's take a moment to tell people how they can connect with you.
Sure. So my practice is Red Cedar Psychotherapy. You're able to reach me at redcedartherapy.com and read more on our website. The office phone number is 615-994-1314. You can go ahead and book a consultation, or if you're ready, book the first appointment and we'll start together.
All right, you guys heard it here. Start that journey. This is your wake up call. Now is the time for you to begin that journey back to yourself. Take your power back, and you do that by taking control, going to therapy, and getting the help that you need. And don't stop at that first therapist.
That's
If it's
right.
not the right fit, then keep on moving.
That's right.
But one thing for sure, as long as you are committed to your healing journey, as long as you're in the game, as long as you don't give up, you will find peace. Eventually, it may not happen overnight, but as long as you continue to show up for yourself every single day, you will make it through what you're going through. I am a testament to that, and so many other people are too, whether they share it with you or
Yeah,
not.
that's right.
Thank you all again for joining us on How Do We Heal? This is a community conversation about how we can work collectively to make it a better world for us all. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Bye.